My father's car suddenly came to a stop and my heart raced faster. It was my first day in boarding school as an SS1 student. My eyes drifted to the large signboard in front of the school gate. Orange Girls Government College, Gushi, shaping girls into women. I sighed heavily and shook my head. I hated this. I really hated this. I don't want to go, I muttered under my breath, my fingers gripping the hem of my skirt. What did you say? My mother asked sharply, looking over her shoulder. Nothing. But I knew it wasn't nothing. I had pleaded with them for weeks, begged them not to send me here. I didn't want to go to a boarding school. I had even tried crying in front of my mother, hoping it would soften her heart. But she had only laughed it off, her voice tinged with amusement. Ruth, stop this nonsense. I went to boarding school. Your father went to boarding school. All your older siblings, five of them, passed through boarding school. They spent 6 years there. Six! You are lucky we are only sending you for three because you are the last born. We've pecked you long enough. You have to go. Don't worry, she added with a knowing smile. You'll enjoy it. No, I wouldn't, I screamed to myself. I wouldn't enjoy it one bit. I had heard everything about boarding schools, possessed students screaming in the middle of the night, wicked senior girls who punished you for no reason, classmates who would gang up and bully you for acting different, and the one that scared me the most, lesbianism. I shuddered, the stories flashing through my mind. Senior girls luring younger girls to do things with her in the dark of night behind locked dormitory doors. I shook my head furiously, trying to push the thoughts away. My mother had given me proper sex education ever since I started my period at 11. She never missed a chance to remind me, too, even on my birthdays, when she'd ask with a suspicious smile, Ruth, I hope you are still a virgin. I was sure that was one of the main reasons my parents were so keen on sending me to boarding school to avoid teenage pregnancy and, of course, reduce the workload they already had with six young adults still living at home unemployed. We got out of the car and my parents gathered my belongings. My mother balanced my basket of clothes on her hip while my father hoisted my school bag onto his shoulder. I trailed behind them, dragging my box reluctantly. As we approached the school gate, a stern looking security officer stepped forward and raised his hand. Only students allowed beyond this point, he announced firmly. Parents, hand everything over to your child. She can join her colleagues from here. I froze. This was it. The moment I had dreaded. My father tapped me on the shoulder, his expression softening. You'll be fine, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. I leaned in for a hug, burying my face in his chest. Daddy, I don't want to go, I whispered, my voice cracking. He patted my back gently. Don't worry, you are stronger than you think. My mother pulled me into her arms next, holding me tightly. Ruth, you'll be fine. Just focus on your studies. Make good friends, okay? She pulled back, looking into my eyes. Do you hear me? Yes, mommy, I mumbled. She rummaged through her handbag and pulled out some crumpled naira notes. Take this, add it to the one daddy gave you, okay? My father chuckled. Rich woman, he teased, winking at me. I couldn't help it. I smiled, even though my heart felt heavy. My father always had a way of making me smile, no matter the situation. I waved goodbye to them, gripping my things tightly as I turned toward the large canopy where other students were gathered. Underneath, a long line of girls waited to register for the new academic session. I stood at the gate leading to the senior hostel, nervously gripping the handle of my basket. Because of excessive bullying in the past, junior students were kept in a separate block from the seniors. The senior hostel, recently built as per 15 years ago, was called Blue Blocks due to the bright color of the buildings. In contrast, the junior hostels were nicknamed the Old Dummy since that was the first dormitory built by the school when it came into existence in the early 1980s. Next! A sharp voice barked, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Madame Sarah, the eldest of the matrons and the one in charge of the Purple House Hostel. Her towering presence was intimidating. Her lips were set in a thin line, and her eyes seemed to scan each student like a hawk. I pushed my things forward hesitantly. My basket was small but tightly packed with my belongings, clothes I had carefully folded and ironed the night before, toiletries, and a few essentials my mother insisted I bring. Madame Sarah began rummaging through my basket with no care for how meticulously I had arranged it. She tossed my clothes onto the half tarred ground, one by one, without a second thought. My neatly pressed clothes landed in the dirt, and I screamed inwardly. I clenched my fists, but I dared not say anything. She sized me up with a sneer. Are you carrying any contraband? No, I replied softly, keeping my head low. Eh, she muttered, clearly unconvinced. She then stared at me for a moment longer and sighed. I stood there, unsure of what to do next. My belongings were still scattered across the ground. Was she not going to pack them back into the basket? I glanced at her, waiting for her to do or say something. Uh-uh, why are you standing there like a moon? She suddenly yelled, her voice booming across the yard. Pack your things and clear the area now. Laughter erupted from the girls standing behind me in line. My face burned with embarrassment. I crouched down quickly, scooping up my clothes and items, dusting off the dirt where I could. My hands trembled as I stuffed everything back into the basket. This is what my parents signed me up for, I whispered to myself bitterly as I carried my things into the hostel. The purple houseware they gave me during registration hung awkwardly on my frame. It was too big and shapeless, like a sack draped over my body. I sighed, tugging at the hem as I walked down the road towards the dining area. It was dinner time, and the air was filled with the faint smell of food from the kitchen. Despite the number of girls miling around, I felt terribly alone. I hadn't made a single friend yet, not even someone to walk with and pretend everything was fine. I was lost in thought, staring at the ground as I walked, when a sharp voice rang out behind me. Claire! I turned, confused. A group of senior students was approaching, walking shoulder to shoulder in a straight line that blocked the road. They moved with an air of authority, their expressions hard and unbothered. Claire! Another voice backed. Panicking, I shifted to the left, trying to make way. But no sooner had I moved than another girl shouted, Claire! I stepped to the right this time, unsure of where to go. Claire, you deaf goat! Came another yell, louder and angrier. I froze, realizing I had run out of space. The only option left was the gutter. My heart raced as I glanced at the murky water and debris below. Surely, they can't expect me to step into that. Before I could react further, one of the seniors, a tall girl with an intimidating presence, marched up to me. Her name, I would later learn, was Senior Peace. Without warning, she shoved me hard. I stumbled, my feet slipping on the edge of the road. My arms flayed, but it was no use. I crashed into the gutter, scraping my knee against the rough concrete. Pain shot through my leg, and I let out a loud scream. Laughter erupted from the group as they continued walking. Peace. You didn't have to push her into the gutter now. One of the seniors called out, her tone laced with mild disapproval. But Peace barely glanced back, shrugging as if it were no big deal. She should have cleared properly, she muttered, already blending back into the group, heading to the dining hall. The senior who had spoken out stopped and turned back to me. Her expression softened as she saw me clutching my bleeding knee. Hey, I'm so sorry, she said, rushing over. She crouched down beside me, her voice gentler now. Are you okay? Tears welled up in my eyes, and before I could stop myself, I burst into bitter sobs. It's okay, don't cry, she said, reaching out to help me up. Her sudden kindness only made me angrier. Why was she acting nice now? Wasn't she part of the group that forced me into the gutter? She placed a hand on my shoulder, steadying me as I stood. Let me take you to the sick bay, she offered, her tone sincere. I didn't say a word, too choked up with emotions. As we walked, I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. The pain in my knee, a dull throb, compared to the humiliation I felt. I glanced at her once, and she caught my gaze. My name is Maria, Signor Maria. She smiled warmly, asking for my own name. Her actions felt confusing, almost hypocritical. I couldn't tell if she was genuinely sorry or just trying to ease her own guilt. Either way, I said nothing as she led me away. As the nurse on duty at the sick bay dressed my injury, she glanced at me, her brow furrowed in mild concern. How did you manage to get hot on your very first day? She asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and suspicion. I opened my mouth to answer, but caught Signor Maria's piercing stare from across the room. It wasn't a direct glare, it was a silent warning, a look that said, better not say anything. I forced a smile at the nurse. Oh, nothing serious, I lied. I didn't see my way and grazed my knee on the gutter. The nurse pursed her lips, her eyes scanning my face as though trying to detect the truth. Hmm, she said, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to press further. She tied up the dressing with a quick, efficient knot and gave me a nod. All right, you are good to go. But be careful next time, okay? Thank you, ma, I replied, sliding off the bed. Signor Maria and I walked out of the sick bay in silence, the evening air cool against my skin. The atmosphere felt unusually quiet. All of the students were at the dining hall, at least most of them. There were always a few who preferred to stay hidden, doing only God knows what. Will you eat Indomie? Signor Maria's voice broke the silence as we neared the path leading to the staff quarters. Indomie? I echoed, confused by the sudden offer. Yes, she said casually, slipping a hand into her pocket. Even though Indomie is contraband, some staff sell it to students. I can buy some for you. Then we can head back to the hostel. Her voice trailed off as she pulled out a spare hostel key and dangled it in front of me. We can eat there before the students return. My heart thumped hard against my chest as the meaning behind her words sank in. Something about the way she said it, the casualness laced with a hint of something deeper, screamed lesbianism to me. My stomach churned and I felt a lump rise in my throat. No, I'm not interested, I blurted out, my voice sharper and louder than I intended. Signor Maria stopped in her tracks, her brows knitting together. Why did you say it like that? She asked, her tone sharp with irritation. What are you thinking in your head, madam? Her voice rose, a mix of anger and frustration. I'm only trying to be nice. See this one, she scoffed, waving the key dismissively. I'm only trying to help. Before I could respond, she turned to her heel and began walking briskly in the opposite direction, muttering under her breath. You must be mad, she hissed, loud enough for me to hear. Even if I'm looking for babe, is it the one wearing Bora Bora Max dress I will be following? Her words hit me like a slap, the sting cutting deeper than my injured knee. My heart sank, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching her retreating figure. I swallowed the lump in my throat, inhaled deeply, and turned back toward the dining hall, the path I had originally intended to take. Each step felt heavier than the last, the limp from my injury, a faint echo of the pain I now felt inside. The dining hall was bustling with activity. Students sat at their designated tables, grouped by classes. I searched for the SS1 table and found a seat among a group of girls. One of them turned to me and smiled warmly. I immediately recognized her from earlier during registration. Hi, I'm Esther, she said, her smile widening. I saw you earlier today. Hi, I replied, returning her smile. Esther's gaze flicked to her plate of rice as one of the other girls who had volunteered to dish the food handed her an extra scoop. Thanks, she said absent mindedly before turning back to me. I felt a small sense of relief. Finally, someone who seemed approachable. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't feel so alone navigating this strange new world. Though Esther wasn't in my class, she was in SS1D for science students, while I was in SS1B for art students. It didn't matter. We were in the same hostel, and that was good enough for me. After dinner, I stuck close to her as we walked back to the hostel. She glanced at my bandaged leg and frowned. What happened to your leg? She asked, concern in her voice. I hesitated before giving her the same excuse I'd given the nurse. She sighed sympathetically. Yeah, sorry you. Boarding school can be crazy, Sha, but we'll get used to it. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. The next few weeks were nothing short of exhausting. Waking up at 4:30 a.m. to bathe in freezing water, rushing out by 5:30 a.m. to pack excreta at the back of the hostels. It felt like some twisted rites of passage. As SS1 students, we were at the bottom of the food chain, stuck with the dirtiest chores. The actual toilets were strictly off limits for students, kept clean and pristine as part of the school's eye service for visiting government inspectors who would leave believing students were in the best living conditions. I barely saw Senior Maria after that day. Occasionally, I would spot her with her friends, her gaze lingering on me a little too long. But she never approached me again. Good, I thought. Let's keep it that way. One hot afternoon after class and during lunch hours, I had left Esther and my other friend, Zandra, at the dining hall, hurrying toward the hostel gate. I wanted to be among the first to enter for two reasons. First, I desperately needed to go to White House, our slang for relieving oneself behind the hostel. Second, I needed to secure my bucket of water in the box room before it was stolen. I had already replaced 7 buckets in just 5 weeks, and it was starting to drive me insane. But just as I neared the gate, a loud voice stopped me in my tracks. Wanju, the slang for one junior, rang out, making me freeze. I turned to see Senior Emanuela, an SS2 student, glaring at me. Wanju, come and carry this bucket of water for me into blue blocks. She barked. I hesitated, frustration boiling beneath the surface. I I have menstrual pain, I stammered, hoping the excuse would buy me some mercy. Signor Emanuela scoffed. Me too, I have menstrual pain. Oh yeah, carry it and stop wasting my time. The gate had just opened and students were rushing in. My heart sank. I could already imagine my bucket disappearing. Reluctantly, I picked up her bucket, splashing some water on the ground in defiance. If you finish pouring that water, you will come back and pump more from this pompito, she yelled after me. I swallowed my anger and trudged toward blue blocks. Pompito, the muzzle powered tap that drew water from the ground, was one of the many indignities we endured. I hissed under my breath as I carried the bucket into the hostel she had pointed to. As I entered the hostel to drop the bucket, I froze. There she was. It was Signor Maria. She had taken off everything except her slip, sprawled out on the bed to escape the suffocating heat. Her skin glistened faintly under the rays of sun seeping through her window. My breath hitched. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, slowly, deliberately, she shifted her gaze downward, drawing my attention to her body. I felt my cheeks burn, my heart pounding in a way I couldn't explain. Before I could recover, her eyes locked with mine again, an unspoken challenge flashing between us. Something stirred deep inside me, something I didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Panicking, I turned to leave, but in my haste, I stumbled. The bucket I had dropped beside me tipped over, and water splashed across the floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. I am dead today, I whispered to myself.